Hi everybody, I'm Bryan Mudd, a fan of South Plains politics. Here's your talking points for this week. Breaking the law and getting away with it in Lubbock County. Despite the best effort to clear a case backlog, thousands of dismissed cases are costing the county millions of dollars. And everyone's been trying to get more businesses to relocate and revitalize Lubbock's downtown, but some now say the better strategy may be to relocate people downtown.
From the studios of KMAC Television in Lubbock, your local election headquarters. This is Talking Points with Bryan Mudd.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Also this week, the drama. The Texas legislature is no daytime soap opera with its ever-present amnesia and torrid love affairs, but it's pretty entertaining in the off-season. On last week's episode, we interviewed Lubbock Representative Dustin Burrows, who finally talked about his part in the meeting scandal with the House Speaker and a political activist. Question the validity of his responses if you like, but he did sit here and answer every question, and I suppose that means something. And the antagonist of our story, Empowered Texans head Michael Quinn Sullivan, did respond to that interview, tweeting that Burrows had come up with a third reason that he was at the meeting with Sullivan and House Speaker Dennis Bonnen to answer complaints. And Sullivan adds that it did not explain how both Burrows and Bonnen came with matching hit lists, meaning Republicans that Sullivan claims was asked to target for removal from office in exchange for House media credentials. Now, this is what Sullivan is referring to from last week's show. The meeting with the Speaker and Mr. Sullivan took place June 12th in Austin, quite a while ago. Do you know who asked for the meeting to happen in the first place? My understanding, the assumption that I'm under, is Mr. Sullivan texted and wanted to have a meeting. I will tell you, I happened to be in town for signing a property tax reform bill. I went in there in good faith. You know, Mr. Sullivan is an arch critic of the Texas House. He'd been beaten up on conservative members that used to agree with a lot of the things that he said. We had historic losses in 2018. I lost 12 of my Republican colleagues. We lost a lot of judicial races across the state, and I think that's really going to negatively impact the judiciary. Ted Cruz barely won. I mean, this was an eye-opening thing, and a lot of it had to do with, you know, primaries and people not being ready for 2020. And so I went in there in good faith to answer the complaints, talk about things that, you know, I wanted to get done, things that we actually did agree on, and really wanting to make the focused drive to 2020 and making sure we do that, because it's so much more difficult to pass conservative reforms good for West Texas when you have fewer Republicans to do that. But Sullivan argues that Burrows wasn't too worried about the 10 Republicans on that so-called hit list. The problem with all that is Sullivan still hasn't released his secret recording of the meeting, so we don't know who's telling the truth. Texas Tribune reports that Sullivan told a GOP leader that he has made the recording available to Texas Rangers, who have now, of course, have the job of finding out if any crimes were committed at the meeting. And by law, if Rangers find that a lawmaker has committed a corruption crime, it's referred to prosecutors in that lawmaker's home county. And the Dallas Morning News reports that the district attorney in Speaker Bonnen's home county asked for a Rangers investigation of the meeting back on August 13th. But how much do you really care about all this? You know, we look for some real perspective to our little opera here, and it was suggested we talk to John Montford. Now, he's seen nasty politics from all sides. As a Lubbock County District Attorney, as a state senator, and Texas Tech Chancellor, Montford's probably not Mr. Burrows' best friend, since Montford was once involved in a lawsuit against Burrows' father's law firm. But we're confident he called this one like he sees it when he spoke to KMAC's Wes Rappaport.
We've seen some of this hyper-partisanship. We've seen, you know, some drama unfolding. What's your take here?
You know, in the legislative process, you have drama all the time. And frankly, you know, these things happen in politics. If I were district attorney, I wouldn't take the case, and I'll tell you why. First of all, they were set up, I think, by a political adversary who, in my opinion, allegedly intended to record the conversation before it ever occurred. Secondly, it's a political matter. These things go on all the time in the legislature. I made the comment the other day that if this were a crime, we'd all be doing life sentences after redistricting negotiations, because if you think this is horse trading, you should see what occurs during the time the legislature redraws the House, Senate, and congressional districts.
Which is coming up.
Yeah, those trade-offs are huge. And, you know, these things happen, and I just think it's a mistake for the courts to get involved in political questions, because it's really what it is.
How much of this do you feel like is just just part of the process, and how much of it feels like out of line here?
The process is not pretty. It's not perfect. But if you look at it from a global standpoint, it's the best thing we have going for a democracy. So these things happen all the time in the legislative process. But the other reason I wouldn't take this particular case is because the individual that recorded them is a very powerful lobbyist. Not a day goes by that he doesn't either oppose or support legislation. Not a day goes by that his organization doesn't endorse or oppose candidates. He is very powerful, frankly. He's funded out of Midland by an individual. The only problem is that he doesn't register as a lobbyist like the rest of us have to do. So I think there are a lot of questions. I'd want to hear the whole tape, because there's obviously some things on there that he doesn't want people to hear because he hasn't released the tape.
Do you feel like the controversy that has been stirred up in light of this has taken away from some of the accomplishments that the GOP at the state level is touting this year? I mean, we had this education, property tax reform, a lot of perceived legislative wins. Do you think that this is taking away from that?
Well, it didn't help. I mean, I think there's a judgment. I think the Speaker and Representative Burris didn't use good judgment on this, but I also think they were set up, and I think the accomplishments, which were many during this legislative session, will stand on their own, and I think it's a bump in the road, and we'll get past it.
The other top leaders, the lieutenant governor, the governor, what do you think they're thinking?
I think they're of the opinion we need to get this behind us and get on to more important issues. There are a lot of things going on. I mean, we've got issues concerning water in Texas. There's always issues in education, public education, higher education. They are preoccupied, I think, with these issues and want to, they're not looking for distractions, so this one need to get it behind us.
What do you think this means for 2020? I mean, obviously the bulk of the conversation from what we know about this meeting was about talking about 2020. What do you see as the fallout here, where everything shakes down?
Well, I think the Speaker is going to have to patch some. He's got some patchwork to do with his membership. But I don't think it's catastrophic. I'm assuming, this is strictly an assumption on my part, but after this is all said and done and the Speaker, assuming he survives and is reelected, I'm sure that Dustin's going to maintain an influential role with the Speaker. So, I mean, I don't think it's nothing to brag about, but look, these two guys are relatively new in key leadership positions. They're young, and they're going to make mistakes. They're not perfect. I wasn't perfect. I certainly would like to go back and redo some of the things I did. I made a lot of judgment errors, and they're going to make judgment errors, but it's all a part of the learning experience of serving, and I think it's been a good lesson for Dustin. I think it's a good lesson for the Speaker. But when it's all said and done, I believe they'll survive, and I think it's important. It is very difficult for Lubbock and West Texas members to attain key leadership positions in such a short amount of time. So for that reason alone, I think it's very important that we support these guys and let them go on and do their business.
Wes, Mr. Monfort, thank you for that. And for last week's poll question, we asked if, with everything going on, you're confident in Dustin Burrows' ability to represent District 83 and all of us in the legislature moving forward. And 69% of you said no. So somebody's got a lot of work to do here.